Well, hello everyone. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining us for this online message this weekend. As always, if you're not feeling well, and I know that's the case for some folks, hope you bounce back quick. If you're out of town, thanks for watching this, even though you're not with us this Sunday. A couple things going on that we want to let you know about. Monday night is the last Equip class. If you've already signed up for it, it's the last one, so you can't just show up at this one. But if you are signed up and you're a part of it, Monday night is the last Equip class. Wednesday night is Prayer House. I just want to encourage you to lead into prayer. We are a church that is prayer dependent, and we value your prayers. We long for your prayers here at the church. So, and something happens when we pray together in a community. Thursday is the Women's Connect group on, I think it's the last one, Thursday morning. Thursday night, the Men's Connect, Friday morning, and Men's Connect as well. You should be getting in your hands, whether it's through mail or I drop one off at your house, calendar with all the summer events on it. It actually has a magnet on the back. You could stick it on your fridge if you want. So we're going to pass them out to everybody who's here this weekend, but keep an eye in your mail. I'll try to drop one off for some of you or mail it to some others as well. All right. So if you're a kid, what scares kids? What is like a scary thing to a kid? Now, it begins with the letter M, and you might think that the answer is monsters, right? Well, I guess some kids are afraid of the monster under the bed, but let me tell you what a better answer is, and that's the idea of moving. If you're a kid and you have to move, there's nothing good about that. I mean, kids are, I remember having to, I traded schools, and I was in the elementary. I was first grade when we moved from one town to the next. Wasn't very far, but I had to change school systems. And we had to move our kids here when they were in high school, middle school, and elementary, I think, at the time. So moving is hard. It can be a little traumatic for a kid. In fact, one of our kids, when we announced we're moving out here, when we told them we had to move, one of them wanted to boycott Hershey chocolate because we were, moving to the Hershey area. So good things happen when we move. We're going to look at, we're starting a summer series on biographies of the Bible, and the first one is Abraham. Abraham was asked to move, and we're going to look at some of the things we can learn from, I think it was good for my kids to move. It was hard, but it was good. And good things come when we move, and we can see some great things that came from the story of Abraham being asked to move. The Lord said to Abram, later Abraham, the Lord said, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and with Lot with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out for Haran. Why the fear of moving for kids is kind of seen here in Abraham's story. Abraham was asked to leave three things. The first thing he was asked to leave was his comfort, to leave the familiar. We like routines and a sense of normal, okay? Especially when the world is crazy, we really value a sense of normalcy. So when you're moving, and whether it's a kid or Abraham, you're asked to leave your comfort. He was asked to leave his security. Okay, now that means that security, we find security in two things. First, our things, our possessions make sense, but we also find security in our history and our memories as well. He was asked to depend on God in new ways. The third thing Abraham was asked to leave was his status. He found in his father's home. He was to move and become a nobody, to be unknown to others. So that makes moving hard for Abram. He's asked to leave his comfort, his security, his status. Now, God also wants us to leave those three things as well. He wants us to leave our comfort. We may also need to leave the familiar to walk in new blessings. And that's kind of a key for the weekend. We might be asked by God to leave what's familiar and comfortable if we want to enjoy new blessings. We are asked to leave our security, the security of things and memories even. God desires for us to find our security in Him and Him alone, not the things that we own and not even our past history and the memories that kind of, the relationships basically. Maybe that's a better way to look at it, the security of relationships. And the last one is He does ask us to leave our status, in that our self-worth is not seen in our position or other people's opinions of ourselves. Okay, so the same way God asked Abram to leave these three things, He kind of asked that of us. So how do we leave these three things? Comfort. We must, like I said before, we must be willing to leave the familiar to walk in new blessings. Abraham left the familiar and he was blessed for it. He enjoyed more blessings. We are creatures of routine and habit, both physically, obviously, but we're also creatures of habit when it comes to spiritually. We get into comfortable places spiritually. We become complacent. You might say, this might be seen in the way you might say, I got God all figured out. If you ever feel like you've got God all figured out, this is the way God has to work, and He would never do that, there's a possibility that there's a measure of complacency. If you say, I'm not comfortable with people doing that, it's raising hands in worship, the topic of spiritual gifts, even hard theology, we all get kind of into comfortable places where we become complacent spiritually. Security, how do we leave our security? We must be willing to shed our dependence on possessions in the past. Again, the past is the memories and the relationships that we have. We can't depend on those. People are going to move away from us. We're going to move away from them. God wants us to find our security and our dependence on Him. The resources, the things that we have, it's harder for us not to depend on those things because we live in a land of such abundance, no doubt. So it might be a bigger challenge. Jesus had the parable, don't build bigger barns. And that's the temptation of our heart, to always build bigger barns because we have security and stuff. And again, it goes back to the idea of memories. Don't find your security in memories or relationships. Are you more excited about the future or the past? That's a pretty pivotal question. Are you more excited about the future or are you more excited about the past? And sometimes we get so caught up in the good things of the past that we cheat ourselves. We talked about that before. Again, we talked about it when the blessings of the old temple, the story was that the people were building a new temple, but it didn't compare to the old temple. It was never going to be as great, as grand as the old temple. So they got discouraged and disappointed in it. And then again, the status. We must be willing to care less about ourselves and what others think of us. Okay? There's a really big compliment. If anybody's ever say of you, they're really comfortable in their own skin, that's a huge, huge compliment. A couple weekends ago, our daughter graduated from a school down in Washington, D.C., a small graduate school, and they had a very foofy, very formal, very highbrow, if I can use that phrase, a very formal, very, kind of stuffy, reception for all the grads and the professors and the people who support the school. And, there's some big hitters walking around, guys in the white, dressed military whites, and people that have some positions and things. The chancellor there worked with Ronald Reagan. I got a chance to ask him what Ronald Reagan was like. And so it was a pretty, highfalutin kind of thing. One of the graduates there, he's a kid, he's older than my daughter, but still young, he got a nosebleed. And if I was at this fancy reception and I got a nosebleed, I'm going to the bathroom and I'm not coming out until I know that it's taken care of. Well, this kid just took a napkin, kind of rolled it up and put it in his nose to stop the nosebleed. But there was still like 3 inches of the napkin, like a cigar, hanging out of his nose. And he just walked around like it was no big deal. He did not care about what other people thought about him. Now, there were some impressive people in that room. Like I said, the chancellor, who, I had a chance to talk to about his experience in the Ronald Reagan Security Council or whatever he had his role in. But to be honest, I might be more impressed by this kid who is just walking around with this big old napkin rolled up hanging out of his nose. He did not care. He did not care if he looked silly or what other people thought about him. We need to be comfortable in our own skin. Tiring, always trying to impress people is incredibly tiring. You know, it's just, you're always playing a game in a facade. But it's also tiring to be around those who are always trying to prop themselves up. So it's exhausting to do it. And to be honest, it can be a little exhausting to be around people that are always doing that. You might have heard this quote or something like it. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's thinking more about others. Humble people are so focused on serving others, they don't think of themselves. And then Jesus, you know, he says, what makes the world uncomfortable? What makes the world uncomfortable? His hard teaching? What makes us uncomfortable? All right, when you think of the life of Jesus, what makes us more uncomfortable? His hard teaching or the fact that he washed the disciples' feet? I gotta be honest. I think I'm more challenged by Jesus washing disciples' feet as an example for me than the hard things he might have shared, okay? So, again, Jesus didn't care. He was willing to do something humbling and humiliating. Well, I used to have this I still have it, a brown notebook, and I used to write all kinds of things I wanted to try to remember. And I have a quote, I call it a brown notebook quote, if you will. Maybe I should have brought it. I could have held it up for the camera. And this is the quote that I heard at a conference once I was at. It was so good I wrote it down. The speaker said, "We need to vacate the present and experience a sense of loss before we can move to deeper things. What mud puddle do you need to step away from? Or what do you need to overcome?" Okay, so God asked Abram to move away from the things that he liked and loved and appreciated and depended on. God might ask us, I'll read it again, we need to vacate the present and experience a sense of loss before we can move to deeper things. Again, what mud puddle do you need to step away from, and what do you need to overcome? Now, that mud puddle analogy, it comes from a famous line from C.S. Lewis. All right, so we're going to ask the question, what mud puddle do you need to step away from? You know, what's a mud puddle? C.S. Lewis wrote, "We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because they cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased." So the picture that C.S. Lewis has is this kid's just happy to play with the mud puddle when there's a whole ocean, there's a whole beach, there's a whole ocean that he could splash around in and enjoy, but he's finding contentment in the mud puddle. We're too easily satisfied. So the question is, what things of the world are too easily satisfying to you? What worldly things are just, again, we find our satisfaction in? Now, it might be physically, it could be food, or physically it could be pleasure. You might have heard also this idea that we have a God-shaped hole. We all have a void in us that can only be filled by God. That innate longing of the human heart for something outside itself, something transcendent, something other. So that's a question. Are there things in the world that are satisfying you, like a mud puddle, when there's so much more? Are you willing to leave the mud puddle, your familiarity, to get stretched and to experience new things? The second part of that quote is, what do we need to overcome? Let me read a passage from Revelation 3. These are the people who persevere. "These I love, I rebuke and discipline." Those I love, I rebuke and discipline. "To be earnest and repent. Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the doors, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. To the one who is victorious," other translations say conquers, "I will give the right to sit with me on my throne, just as I was victorious and sat down with my Father on his throne." So here's the encouragement of Jesus, the admonition, I guess it would be, to overcome. Those who overcome, those who conquer, sit with him on his throne. So the question is, what do you need to conquer, overcome, or relinquish in order to, I'll give you two options, hear God better. What's static, what's mud puddle, or even sin, to be honest, is in your life that's creating static, so you don't hear God, you're not experiencing him as well as you could, or to walk closer with him. So there's mud puddles, there's things we find too easily satisfaction in, but there's also things that trip us up. And we're asked to move away from those things. You think about the phrase good news, and you think about the New Testament, the good news of the gospel. Well, there's good news in the Old Testament as well. There's two promises that just apply as God's asking us to move out of comfortable things. The first one is God is faithful. When circumstances are troubling, God is still at work completing his promises. We can trust that God has a plan for our lives and that he will guide us just as he did with Abraham. And to do this, we have to see God's character as faithful. Faithful is something that he is. It's what he is. It's who he is. It's not what he does. We need to see God's character, his attribute, as faithful. It's not something he does. It's something that he is. When we believe and see God is faithful, not just extending faithfulness, he is faithful, then it's going to be easier to trust in his promises. Then the second one is there are blessings. God desires to bless and reward our obedience. Now, it might not always look like what you want it to look like, but God does have a heart to bless us, reward us when we walk in obedience and when we make hard sacrifices, when we do the hard things. But just like Abraham, I think you can also make the argument God also desires to bless others through your obedience. So as you're obedient, it will bless other people. So the blessings are on you and others. So I'm going to go back to that question. Have you ever moved? Or how are you moving now? We're all on a journey of faith. It's not a physical relocation, but there is a destination. And I just want to encourage of all of us, where are we at in that journey to be moving forward? Even if we're stumbling forward, we're still moving. Abraham faced uncertainties and challenges, yet he continued to follow God's leading. So even in the midst of the hard things, can you lean in and follow God's leading? Again, faith is not the absence of doubt, but the choice to trust God. Now, that's actually a pretty profound statement if you think about it. Faith is not how you feel, it's what you do. And when we start on this journey, we don't see the whole picture, but we can trust that God is guiding every one of our steps. To wrap things up this weekend, it goes back to this idea of taking bold steps. We must listen to God and take these hard, bold, gutsy steps, if you will, in our spiritual journeys, trusting him for the outcome. It requires obedience to God's call. Following God most often requires a step out of our comfort zones. It's the first time I think we've used that phrase, comfort zone. What this whole message is about is, are you willing to step out of your comfort zones to experience a new element, a new experience with your God? And again, Abraham was asked to leave everything that was familiar behind. God's not going to ask you to do that, but he does want us to be stretched. The three questions that we have for everyone this weekend is, what familiar thing, practice, or understanding may God be asking you to leave? Do you have a nice, comfortable understanding of who God is? And are you willing to be stretched by that? All right, stretched in that recognize I become complacent. I put God in a box. Are you willing to stretch out? The second one is, what resources, stuff, possessions, or even good memories, relationships, may God be asking you to let go of? Are you so caught up in the past that you really don't have an anticipation or expectation or anticipation of good in the future? The third question is, how concerned are you about the thoughts and opinions other people have about you? Abraham was asked to leave his status. Are you willing to lay down those things? And how are you relying on them for your self-worth? Are you comfortable in your own skin? Do you find yourself always trying to impress other people around you? That might be an indicator that you're not finding your security in him. You're finding it in the status of what other people think about you. All right. Again, thanks so much for joining us. Hope all is well. Take care and God bless.